Good morning. My name is Andy, and today I solved the New York Times flashback for July 26th, 2025. However, the audio did not record when I recorded this video. So this one will be a little different in that I'm just going to dub some audio over this, basically provide some commentary on what I did. I guess this is kind of similar to when I first started recording videos. I basically dubbed my audio over the video because the audio did not record. So I'm just going to go through each of these events and provide some commentary over it. I'll probably just like skip around or something. So yeah, basically it's the introduction here. Yeah, and I covered my video, so you don't really need to see. But I also had like pistachios, and I was like showing off the package. Yeah. So actually, I can probably just shift this over if possible, like that. Let me just kind of skip back because that's kind of funny. All right, let me see if I can undo. Okay. All right. Let's start with the first event. So, the first event was George Eastman wants an easier way to take vacation photos. He invents the first Kodak camera, and this was in 1888. Yeah, which was like around the time like the Eastman Kodak company started. And then the first event we had was the actress Faye Emerson debuts as one of the first late night TV talk show hosts. She takes the radical approach of combining comedy with politics. Yeah, and I had a feeling it was going to be like around the 50s because that's when TV was like a huge thing. That's when it shot up in popularity. Yeah, so yep, 1949. And then the second event here is Sumerians create one of the first board games where players race around a track. Rules: roll the dice to advance your token. Then, if it's on a bonus square, dot dot dot. Yeah, and I saw Sumerians in it, so I knew it was going to be in the BC era. I think I guessed somewhere around like 1,000 BC, but it ended up being like 2,500 BC. Yeah, and the next event is France declares war on Britain, or yeah, France declares war on Britain. Britain moves troops to its U.S. colonies to defend the territory it cares about even more, the Caribbean. And I guessed somewhere around the early 18th century, but it actually ended up being like a little later than that. It was like in, let's see, 1778. The next event we have is a musician writes a song about his friend's midnight plane to Houston. The lyrics evolve and become Gladys Knight's Midnight Train to Georgia. And, excuse me, and I guess somewhere around the 60s, something like that, but slightly later. It's 1973. And then the next one was to keep invaders out. Competing Chinese states build barriers that later become the Great Wall that help them focus on their real enemies, one another. And I guessed this one to be between 1778 and 2500 BCE. But yeah, it ended up being somewhere around, let's see, 400 BCE. Yeah, which seems about right. And then the next one is the Mona Lisa is stolen. It isn't very popular, so no one actually notices until the next day. The theft is what makes the painting famous. And my initial guess for this one was between 1778 and 400 BCE, but that ended up being incorrect to my shock. But that makes a lot of sense because the Mona Lisa did not become popular until it was actually stolen from the museum. And yeah, that was something I kind of learned, but I almost feel like that's common knowledge in some ways. So I should have known that one. Okay, the next one is as Lewis and Clark trek to the Pacific, a canoe nearly capsizes. The team's papers and tools are saved by its quick thinking interpreter, Sacagawea. And I guess this one to be between 1778 and 1888. And I knew it was like sometime in the early 19th century. It was something around there. You skip 1805. And yeah, that seems about right because they were essentially like explorers of the United States. Okay. And then the last event we have was President Millard Fillmore sends U.S. gunboats to Japan, forcing it to open up for trade. This helps to later end the rule of shoguns and samurai. And I initially knew that this was because, they sent over this guy named the sailor, or officer, I should say, named Matthew Perry, not to be confused with the Friends actor. But Commodore Matthew Perry basically went to Japan and he opened up Japan for trade. And he knew Japan had like this whole isolation policy because it didn't want to be bothered by any other country, nor did it want to bother any other country. And then because ended up opening up, this allowed them to actually industrialize during that time. And slowly but surely, the shoguns and samurai ended up getting phased out. So it's essentially the end of feudalism. And if you just kind of go on, yeah, that's essentially what I talked about. It was almost the gist of it. I don't know if I'm missing anything, but I do talk about that a little more. Yeah, and it ended up being 1852 to 1855, which seems about right. And then I kind of, yeah, so I was in good company with 42% of players, and I would assume that a lot of people probably got the Mona Lisa one wrong, but who knows? And yeah, I basically just went over the Mona Lisa and how I was basically surprised with how it didn't become popular until like way later, probably like 400 years after it was created. Yeah. Yeah, and I also talk about Matthew Perry, who was one of the sailors who sailed to Japan to like try to open them up. And I talk about how I know all of this stuff because I've watched samurai films by Akira Kurosawa and how Seven Samurai is one of my favorite movies of all time, basically. I also recommended, let me see, I also recommended Yojimbo, which is a movie that takes place in the 1860s. So basically, the precipice of modernization. Like it was basically like about to modernize, or it was like at the time where things were transitioning from like feudalism to industrialization. And Yojimbo basically, I saw there was like a character who had a gun in that movie, so it was quite interesting. And I would highly recommend this movie if you haven't seen it. Still haven't seen the sequel, which is Sanjuro, but I should at some point. Okay. Yeah. Well, I hope you enjoyed my commentary of Flashback. Yeah, unfortunately didn't get the audio for this video, but oh well. It is what it is. It happens. I'll catch you all later.